Hey there, I'm Mark, in affiliation with Spectrum Pulse, and dear God, this week's a mess, and it's Billboard Breakdown. I don't remember. Alright, truth be told, I've had enough longer weeks in a row now that I don't have any expectation that the Hot 100 is going to make this summer easy. And considering that we likely have a Zach Bryan album bomb next week, the thought remains the same. I'm still going to complain a little about it though. I have so much stuff that I gotta finish off. Billboard Breakdown requiring those extra few hours of work every single week. It's exhausting, but hey, at least it's going to be interesting, right? Well, alright, let's start out with the top 10 and the new number 1 that I might have predicted, but in my gut, I never would have seen this coming. A bar song, Tipsy by Shaboozey, has taken the top spot. And really, it's one of the rare examples of everything coming together at precisely the right time. Sales are top of the line, sure, but serious muscle was thrown behind his radio, and he topped the charts on streaming. One of the rare cases where someone is dominant across the board, and it took a while to get there, and with their lead-off single. It's the sort of thing that has me feeling a little bit crazy that we aren't seeing a push for more songs out of him, or that there hasn't been more discussion of Shaboozey in general. He's got a whole album that's really good where very few have covered it on this platform. And while I get not cannibalizing one's momentum, Let It Burn is right there, ready to go. Come on, people. Now anyway, it beat out I Had Some Help by Post Malone featuring Morgan Wallen despite its cementing radio dominance with an uptick on sales, but it just couldn't beat out the streams in the end, so it slid back to number 2. Then we got Not Like Us by Kendrick Lamar holding steady at number 3, which slipped off the very top on streaming and seems like it may have peaked on the radio. I think the only reason it did as well as it did was because material around Kendrick was falling back. Case in point being Espresso by Sabrina Carpenter at number 4, who lags him considerably on streaming and sales, but also just could not run up the airplay margin fast enough to jump past. Then we got Million Dollar Baby by Tommy Richmond at number 5, which is actually picking up a spot because its streaming is ridiculously consistent, and the radio growth is holding steady. And that was enough to jump over Please 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 by Sabrina Carpenter, now at number 6, which might be winning out on streaming, but it did slip a little there, and just has so much ground to cover to catch up on that radio margin. And the next 3 songs, just like last week, they're not moving. Too Sweet by Hozier at number 7, thanks to solid but wavering radio and better sales. Beautiful Things by Benson Boone at number 8, which is edging out on streaming but loses on sales and it's slipping into radio freefall after a brief stabilization. And Lose Control by Teddy Swims at number 9, which might have a bit of an edge over Benson Boone on the radio, but is losing everywhere else. Now finally, and man, this is good to see, breaking into the top 10 we got Good Luck Babe by Chappell Roan at number 10. This is actually an interesting case because she does have some radio to push alongside the streaming, but I'm not sure how consistent it all looks. A lot of Chappell Roan's hype has been generated off of that streaming. The bigger question will be how that translates to channels that will demand more label attention, aka the radio, especially if there's a chunk of songs above her that are slipping into decline. Pray they can actually capitalize on it. But it also naturally takes us to our losers and dropouts, which of course the big story here is Texas Hold'em by Beyonce finally stepping out and comfortably clinching its year-end list position, alongside Guilty as Sin by Taylor Swift and Bandit by Don Toliver falling out yet again. They're falling well short. And you know, while we're on the topic of Taylor Swift, she did see some losses with Down Bad at 82 and Who's Afraid of Little Old Me at 97, although it's worth highlighting that her song with Gracie Abrams, Us, that debuted last week just crashed down to 74, alongside her cut Close to You that fell to 79. Then going through the rest of the debuts from last week that lost, we had Parking Lot by Mustard and Travis Scott down to 75, Girl So Confusing by Charlie XCX and Lorde at 99, and in its wild journey up and down the charts, The Boy Is Mine by Ariana Grande lost all its gains again and fell hard to 53. Then we had the Billie Eilish album bomb losses, Chihiro at 65, Wildflower at 85, and L'amour de ma vie at 98. And from there, kind of all over the place. Euphoria by Kendrick Lamar seeing the steady drop off at 54. Sweet Dreams by Ko Wetzel continues to lose at 80. After Hours by Kehlani saw all of its gains evaporate at 84. And Remember Him This Way by Luke Combs sadly saw more losses to 91. I honestly thought that might have a little staying power, but okay. What's filling in the gaps? Well, can't make much of the returns with Wondering Why by the Red Clay Strays once again back at 100, and Okay by JT getting a remix with Jeezy with a video to return to 72. But the gains appear to be a little more interesting, outside of Pink Pony Club by Chaperone, of course, just continuing to climb at 56, because they're all debuts from last week that gained traction, and man, I wish they were better, because while it's cool, You Look Like You Love Me by Elle Langley featuring Riley Green is seeing industry attention rising to 36. And you know, I'm fine with TGIF by Glorilla up to 28 because I like her and I like the traction. Did it really need to throw any attention to Kehlani by Jordan Atatunje up to 52 while actively snubbing Kehlani? And more egregiously, why is Nights Like This by Kid Laroi getting any attention at all at 47? I know he's picking up streaming, but seriously, his is not a career that needed a second wind. But unfortunately, speaking of some of that, we gotta get to our new arrivals, which is a pretty healthy list, and we're unfortunately starting with number 96, I Don't Wanna Wait by David Guetta and OneRepublic.
I don't wanna wait, got no reason not to celebrate, baby, I just don't wanna wait.
I can't tell you just how much my stomach sank when I saw we were starting off with this. Do we really need another interchangeable sample or the continued degradation of any shred of OneRepublic's remaining reputation? And surprise, surprise, we've got that. Although it might take you a little bit more to recognize what is actually due to that interpolation, that being the Ozone track Dagonste Dinte, aka the Numa Numa song, aka didn't Rihanna already do this back in 2009 with Live Your Life, when David Guetta's relevance was on the come up? But at least before, the sample had some verve to it, not pushed through the clunky, overcompressed mix, the underpowered percussion, or every other signifier that heralds this mix as being one of the Red One's leftovers from the club boom. And of course, Ryan Tedder has nothing to add here. The sort of utterly vacant party song where he's not as annoying as he can be, but he's got no real personality as a result. The most I can say is that David Guetta has weaponized more annoying samples than this in recent times. This is probably his most disposable of the EDM crossovers he's attempted in recent years. But again, to no somebody's surprise, it's not good. Next, number 95, Tobey by Eminem, Big Sean, and BabyTron.
You take your helmet off soon as you get up to Venus and choke. Even while sleeping, be thinking so woke. White Cartiers, all I'm seeing is dope. My city Leia and I'm Obi-Wan, got a mission to pass, I just might be the hope.
So I've largely ignored talking about the fact that Houdini is sticking around in the top 20. I bet some of you didn't even realize that, but it's got radio traction now. Or that there's a very real possibility Eminem will get an album bomb after when that drops this Friday. In the meantime, he's teaming up with Big Sean and BabyTron, the latter of whom I'm less familiar with, but he's out of Michigan, he's got some buzz. It's probably why he's on the hook and the first verse of this song. And with this, you know what? Honestly, it is pretty decent, but unfortunately not because of Eminem. Dude, I get you being concerned about your legacy at this point of your career, but aside from no longer being in my personal top 5 list, and that choice went back to around somewhere in 2018, you shouldn't care about anybody's stupid top 5 list, especially one from Billboard. And the reason that everyone told you to not shoot back at Melly Mel, because it was sad and embarrassing. The same reasons we all wanted Freddie Gibbs and Benny the Butcher to stop fighting. It's just sad. When you're over 50, you should be better than this. And you know, while I'm complaining here, the production's kinda iffy. The creeping bombast honestly reminded me a lot more of NF's production than it really should. Thankfully, it doesn't succumb all the way to that cinematic self-parody, but that's because there's a bunch of sizzling electric guitars rammed in that don't really flatter anyone. Not helped by whenever Eminem keeps jamming more words into his verse and the double time does not fit well within the pocket. Now, thankfully, I actually think BabyTron and Big Sean largely save this. BabyTron's hook is nerdy, but it's well structured enough. And while the come-up flex isn't all that special, his delivery is methodical enough to make it work. And you know what, I can't believe I'm saying this, but Big Sean easily has the best verse here. I can tell he was very frustrated to see his new music get stepped on and overshadowed by the larger beef in hip-hop this past spring. So between those thoroughly burned bridges with good music and then locking into his next round of targets, I don't know, Big Sean sounds focused. The bars are reasonably solid. For this sort of driving posse cut as somebody looking to re-establish presence in the mainstream, this would be how you do it. So, yeah, you know what, I don't think it all works, but it is decent. I like it more than Houdini, so I'll take it. Number 94, New to Country by Bailey Zimmerman.
Put him up in a PJ, he'll still try to get them 40 stuck. So line him up, turn it up and keep it running. Say whatever you want, but I'm anything but new to country.
I might be running out of patience for Bailey Zimmerman. He's got songs I really like, don't get me wrong, but 2023 showed me the hard limit of his sound, and when the buzz around this was not good, I had a sinking feeling. And unfortunately, it was justified, as this reminds me way too much of the swaggering, macho side of bro country that relies a lot on sterile rock posturing in the guitars, no real groove to support the underpowered drums and drum machines, don't try to sneak that past me, and a rap pattern that doesn't feel that country at all, highlighting that no matter where he is, he's not new to country, and then insert your grab bag of bro country cliches. And okay, Bailey Zimmerman is 24. When he was a teenager, he actually heard that first wave of bro country. He was there, but posturing like that, it's trying to sell some veneer of authenticity that I don't buy, because I was old enough to remember when bro country last happened, and it wasn't exactly all that authentic depending on the angle. But what I think bugs me most about here is that the vocals sound really badly blended. The mix is already sour and somewhat minor key, but with no credible weight to it. But Zimmerman's nasal squawk does not fit well at all. He needs a little bit more smolder to be complimented, but the hook's way too polished. So yeah, this isn't good at all, and his goodwill is running out in record time. Skip it. Number 88, Smeraldo Garden Marching Band by Jimin and Loco.
I love you, babe.
Yes, sir.
I want you, babe. I wanna hold your hand. I want you, babe.
Okay, I'm gonna try to add context. You probably recognize Jimin from BTS, but Loco might be unfamiliar. He's a South Korean rapper, has been active since the late 2010s with a decent number of EPs and projects, and this song was being described as a kind of tongue-in-cheek in contrast between the bombastic instrumental and the rapping. I'm honestly not sure I would have picked up where the joke is. I mean, if you translate the lyrics, it seems like a pretty stock love song, maybe a bit oversold, or any real degree of sarcasm in the delivery, but that might be more because of the production. And you know, I'll just say it, this is Jimin taking production cues from AJR. The pitch-shifted chipmunk vocal that opens up the song and won't go away, the lockstep marching percussion, the cheap-sounding horns. The only thing I'll actually give it is having a somewhat credible bass line, and that is not saying much. On a pure sonic level, I don't like this at all. It gave me a migraine on the first listen, and while I'm willing to accept I am missing part of the joke here, the instrumental is obnoxious enough I have no desire to go back. And given how much BTS-related acts have relied on heartfelt sincerity, if this is trying to be a piss take, it's not one I find insightful or remotely charming. In other words, it's bad. Let's move on. Number 77, Where Them Girls At by Megan Thee Stallion.
Where them girls at? Where them girls at? Where them girls at? Where them girls at? Where them girls at?
So I already reviewed Megan Thee Stallion's newest project, Megan, on my main channel, probably her best since Tina Snow. It's really good, it's worth hearing, check out my review. But thus I find it interesting and a little frustrating that we didn't exactly get any of the best songs on that album to chart in the mini album bomb she got this week. We'll get more into those in a little bit, but this is probably the best of them, and I'm not sure it's saying much. In short, it's a minimalist strip club joint with a huge bass, tooting synth, and blast of horns that's liberally sampling Missouri-based rapper key stylist, where I really wish the trap percussion had the texture the clattering snare that ends off the hook had. And sure, Meg can sell this in her sleep. She's hot, she wants to dunk on all the haters as she parties, and she's not exactly interested in playing nice. Which is why the hook doubles as a shout out to those haters who won't show their faces with credible bars. Of course I'm talking about Nicki Minaj, and judging by Nicki's most recent social media meltdown, there may be something to that. But honestly, there's barely anything else to this song. It's effective in what it's trying to be, but Meg can be a lot more interesting than just playing in this lane or do more with it. Although, given what her fans chose to push this week, it caught me a little off guard. We'll get to that. As it is, I appreciate the sort of banger having a little bit more swagger and low-end bass. It feels very mid-2000s to me, but let's be real, everyone here has done better. Just okay. Number 70, Rockstar by Lisa.
Make your favorite singer wanna rap, baby la la. Lisa, can you teach me Japanese? I said hype, hype. That's my life, baby, I'm a rock star.
I shouldn't be shocked that folks are still trying to make Lisa a thing outside of Blackpink, especially given that she's crossed over more on the global charts and she needs to do something while the girl group is negotiating their next contract with YG Entertainment. But I still kinda am surprised, mostly because it feels like she hasn't had that consistent charting presence stateside as of yet, especially compared to other solo breakouts from other bands in Korea. But this is her next big solo charting hit, her first big single in around 3 years, where apparently she has her own deal with RCA. Yikes. And the song... Okay, you know what? I think I pinned down the issue. Because when members of BTS break away from the group, they try to establish and assemble sounds that differentiate themselves from it, for better, or to see this week, for worse. Lisa, meanwhile, is delivering the solo version of another Blackpink song, all about the very chic rapping and flexing that feels painfully shallow, wonky synths, and a general train wreck of song construction. I mean, this track's barely 2 minutes long, but manages to start off with that painful dying synth, a swerve into trap where the percussion sounds imported from a tin can, then swerve into these gleaming, borderline hyperpop chords, and then tries for this swaggering outro, and I'm left thinking that all this needs a little bit more than just the skeleton of an idea. Give some of this some room to breathe. So, you know, maybe it's not a total mess, but I'm also flagrantly not the audience for this, where I can't remotely buy into the swag. Let's just move on. Number 68, Mamushi by Megan Thee Stallion featuring Yuki Chiba.
Star, I get money, I'm a star. 오카네 가세구, 오레라 스타. 오카네 가세구.
And speaking of cuts where I know I'm absolutely not the target audience, I'll admit to being rather shocked that of the 2 songs that crossed over were Meg indulging her anime fangirl weeaboo side. Not saying it's a bad thing, I've been looking for more diverse and interesting angles around Meg Thee Stallion, and her unabashedly nerdy love for this, it's intriguing. Just man, I wish it translated to better music. In this case, I'm not sure any of this really works. The piano line around the underpowered percussion feels increasingly stiff, not helped by how Meg repeats the word star on the hook, and Japanese rapper Yuki Chiba, I'm sorry, I don't hear the appeal whatsoever. He sounds so bored here, and when translated, the flex of his rhymes feel painfully generic. But what might frustrate me most is Meg's Japanese, and that she comes across like she's really trying to pronounce everything absolutely perfectly, that she's carefully studied all of it, and her swagger just kind of evaporates compared to the verse, which feels a lot more comfortable. I mean, it's got the feel of being a fan that's trying a little bit too hard in a niche space, and as someone who can recognize that tendency in and of himself, yeah, I bounce off it hard, just doesn't work at all for me. Not the worst, but I'm not sure I'm going back to it. Number 67, Otaku Hot Girl by Megan Thee Stallion.
I'm worldwide, these bitches loco. Arigato. Can't touch me like Gojo. Look good in all my ay.
And here we get part 2 of all this, which thankfully is less of Meg trying to speak in Japanese and more just leaning into the anime references, specifically to Naruto and Jujutsu Kaisen. I'm only familiar with the former in passing, and the latter Not really at all. I'm not an anime person on any consistent degree, so with this song, I'm not coming at this from any anime snob perspective, especially as she's just using these references to reinforce her flex. In fact, my favorite lines of the song come at the end of the first verse, where she disses the incel/anime avatar social media dipshits who love to pile on anyone they don't think is authentic in their hobbies or preference, often because it's a bunch of teenage white boys with a healthy dose of racism and sexism on top of it. Don't even try to deny it doesn't happen. I've seen and heard it. I've been in nerdy spaces longer than some of you have been alive. Just kind of a shame the song never really expands on targeting them beyond just Meg's usual flexing routine against that twinkling piano. That actually picks up a pretty cool reversal against that rattling trap beat, but I guess it is cool how she expands the Naruto metaphor for those who are trying to then copy her style, and highlights how really so many folks that cluster around them, they're not their fans, they're just anti-Megan, and that's often true of that brand of online grifter. So as a whole, again, the anime thing doesn't really work for me, but it doesn't make it so much bad as, again, just not for me. If you're more on the wavelength, you'll probably have more fun with it. It's fine, I guess. Number 62, Hot Uptown by Camila Cabello featuring Drake.
Calm me down, couldn't give me up.
Hot uptown, and you miss my love, and you want me back.
Okay, let's be real, this is only charting because folks are perversely curious what the hell Drake was even doing on the Camila Cabello album. If you want to see a car crash, folks are going to slow down and take a look. Quite frankly, I'm very grateful that nothing else from the album charted this week, mostly because the general buzz around said album is rightly bad. It's a bad project. I mean, we're not past hate listening as a culture, but at least in this specific case, it makes my job easier, especially when this just plain sucks. I've seen folks argue that this is the path that Drake should take to reestablish his career. Deliver the summer slap, go back to the formula that works for him, that he arguably ran to the ground in the mid to late 2010s. But I'm sorry, the second the patois came on, I was done, because it proved he had learned nothing from the cultural conversation that Kendrick Lamar was hammering, to the point where he references Hotline Bling in the first verse. Do I even have to bring up how he appropriated that song too? I remember it. But that's the obvious stuff, alongside the watery fragment passing as a melody around the faster skitter of the textured percussion. I'm sorry, the groove is just too quick with this, and when the delivery is otherwise so low-key between them, it doesn't fit well at all, nor does how overprocessed Camila Cabello's voice is. So naturally we get to the content, which is trying to have Drake and Camila Cabello flirt off at each other as two exes. But then Drake tries to get on his dirty macking for whoever Camila's new partner is, which in the context of Shawn Mendes being in the picture on the album at all, it's fucking weird. Dude, I've been saying this for weeks now. Drake, squash your messiness in Toronto. This'll go over a lot easier for you. So as someone who is lukewarm at best on Drake's tropical gallivanting, this is a phoned-in cash grab I need to hit by whatever means necessary for both acts. And I don't think it's gonna work, because it really sucks. Next, number 51, Girls by Kid LAROI.
I don't know your plans. Ay, I just wanna get some. Girls wanna summer with their friends, wanna do it to their ex and then get the job done. Girls just wanna dance. Girls just wanna have fun.
Okay, stop. We don't need this either. I thought last week was a fluke, but now I'm not remotely sure of that because this was apparently targeted as the single from his next project. So what better way to get folks talking about the Kid LAROI again than riding some resurgent TikTok hype, because most of that platform hasn't realized how easily they can be manipulated yet. I see what the industry's doing. But somehow this just gets worse. Apparently the song is partially about Tate McRae, who is in a relationship with a Kid LAROI, with this song partially taking aim at her ex, the NHL hockey player Cole Sillinger. Oh my god, he's got to play for the Columbus Blue Jackets and then deal with this crap? Gross. So okay, the song. Who the fuck told Kid LAROI is capable of trying to make a mid-2000s Justin Timberlake song, borrowing Justin Bieber's vocals but with a lot less tact or talent? Because I actually kinda dig the production, with the grimy synth playing off the strings and pianos and the elegance that stands in stark contrast with that popping rattle of the groove. I mean, on that basis alone, I can imagine it being a pop hit. Thank John Bellion on production for that. But then you give it to the walking non-charisma of Kid LAROI, where he's highlighting how girls just want to have fun, and he's clearly the guy to have it with them, given that her ex apparently cheated. I mean, I don't know how true that is, and I got better things to do than troll the gossip columns to verify it, but hearing it come out of Kid LAROI's deadbeat delivery, it does not inspire much confidence. But what's truly twisted, as while I don't really like this, the production has just enough flair to nail that throwback 2000s vibe. I imagine it's gonna work. I mean, it's not good per se, but if it becomes a hit, I don't think I would be surprised. Just saying. And finally, number 50, Cowboys Cry 2 by Kelsea Ballerini and Noah Kahan.
He's showing his skin like me, and that's when he's toughest to me. I never knew Cowboys cry too.
You know, I don't want to say that Kelsea Ballerini was my big hope this week, especially when pairing her with Noah Kahan, but she did put out one of the best projects of last year that never got the proper attention it deserved, so okay, I had expectations, and thank God we got there with a really goddamn good song. In essence, it's trying to make a point about toxic masculinity. A lot of the guys who put on that stoic, emotionless, hard front, and then why they might do so, show some empathy, then highlight how it doesn't make them any less masculine to show more vulnerability, or make them any less attractive to a partner, which is a detail I really like that they included because it speaks to a pretty deep straight male insecurity. Now, I was initially on the fence with Noah Kahan as the duet partner here because there is a part of me that wishes that Kelsea Ballerini got a more stereotypical Nashville guy for this part, where the contrast might have had a more poignant resonance, but then you have to wonder which of them would have been willing to do it with her, and the reality that Noah Kahan might lead to more overall crossover. I get it. And it also helps they got really good vocal chemistry. The harmonies on the final chorus are really quite nice. And Noah Kahan then getting into the realities of hard living, learning from his father's bad experience, or the relationships that don't work enough that drive men to put up those walls for better and for worse. And when you add in the fiddle and the pedal steel alongside the heavier twang of the guitars, even if I think Ballerini's vocals are a little bit more processed than I would personally prefer, alongside some of the whooshing effects on the bridge that I don't think are really needed, this could have been just more organic overall, but yeah, it's excellent. I got no faith Nashville's gonna give it much attention if the streaming doesn't take off more, mostly because the difficult examination of masculinity here kind of undermines a whole chunk of their business model, but man, I hope I'm wrong. If you haven't heard it, give it a proper shot. This is great. And you know what, on a pretty rough week, it's running away with the top spot, best of the week. Honorable mention going to, yeah, I guess Tobey by Eminem, Big Sean, and BabyTron. Worst of the week, you know, I was inclined to give it to Hot Uptown by Camila, Cabello, and Drake, but it's only getting dishonorable mention. Mostly because on some level, I can imagine a vibe where it's vaguely playable. Unlike Smeraldo Garden Marching Band by Jimin and Loco, which on production alone clinched this spot even before we get to the conceptual incoherence. It's a headache and a half. Thankfully, next week we'll probably have Zach Bryan running the table. I hope to see it. Stay tuned. But until then, I'm Mark. You're watching Billboard Breakdown, affiliated with Spectrum Pulse. And I'll see you next time.